Hey, it's Toby from school. Hope you're safe and well wherever you are. In today's session, we're going to be looking specifically at writing and how writers make us feel and the methods that they use. And with a fair wind, those methods you're going to be able to apply in your writing. So before we crack on, the first thing that I'd like you to do is please write in the chat, write a response to this question. What do writers need readers to do? What is it they need readers to do? What do writers need readers to do? So I love reading, and I didn't always love reading, but I certainly do now. And I think that reading is magical. And I think it's magical because I think it can connect with us in ways that almost feel impossible. I'm holding a copy of a book that my grandparents bought me when I was 11 years old. It is Roald Dahl's Going Solo. And I'm going to read some of this to you today. I love this book. And I love this book because it seems to weave its magic even now. I first was bought this book in 1991. In fact, here is the inscription that my grandparents wrote in it in 1991. And that's already doing something amazing because I was very lucky to know my grandparents very well, and I love them very much. And they're both not on this earth anymore. They both died many years ago. But seeing that somehow makes them alive. And that's an amazing thing. And the other thing is that Roald Dahl had a broadly similar life, well, perhaps not a similar life, but initially a similar life to my granddad. Roald Dahl fought in the Second World War, and so too did my granddad. And I remember when I was a little boy, I'd sit on my granddad's knee and he'd tell me stories about, stories that were suitable for a 9 or 10-year-old about the war. And when I read this, it feels like I'm learning all about my granddad again, which is a personal thing. But books have that power to work in that way. The other amazing thing about the way in which these books work is that Roald Dahl too is long dead. But on these pages, he becomes alive. And not only does he become alive, he becomes alive in our heads. It's a very strange phenomenon. I believe it's the closest thing that we're going to come to magic. And I want to show you today how he does it, and also give you some methods that are going to help you do it. So what do writers need readers to do? So Simon here has said, imagine. That's absolutely right. In order for us to really enjoy a text, then we have to imagine, we have to see it in our heads. That's a fantastic answer. Let's have a look at a couple of things that writers really need us to do. As Simon said, they need us to imagine. They need to take these black and white lines on a page and get them to do something in our heads. And a great writer will enable us to see, to imagine. They also, because imagination requires not just sight, they also need us to hear it. And in the lessons that we've had so far, you will have seen that language depends upon sound. So in order for a great book to exist, in order for a great writer to work his magic, he needs the reader to see it, to hear it rather, and importantly, this is where stuff does go a little bit crazy, he needs us to feel it as well. Now that is very peculiar because I've just said, text is just black and white lines, and how is it possible for this text to actually induce feeling, but good writing will make us feel it. And the most important thing, the thing that is central to writing, is to make the reader turn the page. If a story doesn't make us want to turn the page, then it's not working. And all the publishing companies in the world, all the people that sell books, will suddenly go out of business if writers aren't making readers turn the page. So what I want to do is I want to show you how Roald Dahl does it in a beautiful story that I'm going to read to you. And while I'm doing it, what I'd like you to do is just think about two things. I want you to think about how he's making us feel what's going on and how he's making us turn the page. I'll explain very quickly after I've read it how he makes us see it and hear it, but I want you to think about how Roald Dahl makes us feel it and makes us turn the page. Okay, so this is just an extract from the beginning of Going Solo by Roald Dahl. And Roald Dahl lived in Africa just before the war broke out in 1938. And his job, he worked for an oil company, and his job was to deliver oil to clients. And he lived in this beautiful palatial house, very close to the savannah. And this extract details some of the things that he was frightened of. So I'll begin. I loved that life. We saw a giraffe standing unafraid right beside the road, nibbling the tops of trees. We saw plenty of elephant and hippo and zebra and antelope, and very occasionally a pride of lions. The only creatures I was frightened of were the snakes. We used often to see a big one gliding across the dirt road ahead of the car, and the golden rule was never to accelerate and try to run it over, especially if the roof of the car was open, as ours often was. If you hit a snake at speed, the front wheel can flip it up into the air, and there is a danger of it landing in your lap. I can think of nothing worse than that. The really bad snake in Tanganyika is the black mamba. It is the only one that has no fear of man and will deliberately attack him on sight. If it bites you, you're dead. One morning I was shaving myself in the bathroom of our Dar es Salaam house, and as I washed my face, I was absent-mindedly gazing out of the window into the garden. I was watching Salamu, our gardener, as he slowly and methodically raked the gravel on the front drive. Then I saw the snake. It was 6 feet long and as thick as my arm and quite black. It was a mamba all right, and there was no doubt that it had seen Salamu and was gliding fast over the gravel straight towards him. I flung myself toward the open window and yelled in Swahili, "Salamu, Salamu, Anglia Noka Kubwa, Norma Wewe, Upsi, Upsi." In other words, Salamu, Salamu, beware, huge snake, behind you, quickly, quickly. The mamba was moving over the gravel at the speed of a running man, and when Salamu turned and saw it, it could not have been more than 15 paces away from him. There was nothing more I could do. There was not much Salamu could do either. He knew it was useless to run because a mamba at full speed could travel as fast as a galloping horse. And he certainly knew it was a mamba. Every native in Tanganyika knew what a mamba looked like and what to expect from it. It would reach him in another 5 seconds. I leant out of the window and held my breath. Salamu swung round and faced the snake. I saw him go into a crouch. He crouched very low with one leg behind the other, like a runner about to start a 100-yard sprint, and he was holding the long rake out in front of him. He raised it, but no higher than his shoulder, and he stood there for those long 4 or 5 seconds, absolutely motionless, watching the great, black, deadly snake as it glided so quickly over the gravel towards him. Its small, triangular snake's head was raised up in the air, and I could hear the soft rustling of the gravel as the body slid over the loose stones. I have that whole nightmarish picture of that scene still before my eyes. The morning sunshine on the garden, the massive baobab tree in the background, Salamu in his old khaki shorts and shirt and bare feet standing brave and absolutely still with the upraised rake in his hands, and to one side the long black snake gliding over the gravel straight towards him with its small poisonous head held high and ready to strike. Salamu waited. He never moved or made a sound during the time it took the snake to reach him. He waited until the very last moment when the mamba was not more than 5 feet away, and then, wham! Salamu struck first. He brought the metal prongs of the rake down right hard onto the middle of the mamba's back, and he held the rake there with all his weight, leaning forward now and jumping up and down to put more weight on the fork in an effort to pin the snake to the ground. I saw the blood spurt where the prongs had gone right into the snake's body, and then I rushed downstairs, absolutely naked, grabbing a golf club as I went through the hall, and outside in the drive, Salamu was still there, pressing with both hands on the rake, and the great snake was writhing and twisting and throwing itself about, and I shouted to Salamu in Swahili, "What shall I do?" "It's all right now," he shouted back. "I've broken its back, and it cannot travel forward any more. Stand away, stand well away, and leave it to me." For me, that story is amazing, and I've read it a million times, and it still seems to come alive. I'm still enabled to see it. I can still see the picture. I can still see Salamu. I've no idea what he looks like, and I can still see Roald Dahl running downstairs, absolutely naked, carrying a golf club. It's amazing that words on a page can make us see. It's also amazing that words on a page can make us hear. This week, in the first session, we looked at how language can make us visualize. And this is the first part of it. This is the metaphoric. Then I saw the snake. It was 6 feet long and as thick as my arm. That comparison between the snake and the arm is a visual technique. There, Roald Dahl is trying to make us aware that the snake is that thick. And it's also something that is very common to our experience, our arms. But certainly a black mamba is not something that's common to my experience, and I've never seen it other than on the internet. So he's not only telling us how something looks, how thick something is, that comparison between the snake and the arm, he's also a little bit telling us how it might feel to a certain extent. So there's the seeing it. In your writing today, eventually I'm going to ask you to use some of these methods. The next part is hearing. So this is an amazing feature of language which I could spend, and I am spending, much of my life exploring, which is the way in which sound works in language, how sound can give us information about the thing that it's being used to describe. So here we have the hearing it. This is the rustling of the gravel. As Salamu is waiting for the snake to be within reach of his rake, Roald Dahl can hear the soft rustling of the gravel as the body slid over those loose stones. We talked earlier this week about the way in which sibilance works, that S sound. So if you look at the first lesson in the series this week, it'll give you some information, a little bit more information about the way that sibilance works. But here you can see that it's almost imitating that snake, suggesting that danger is coming. And one of the most amazing things about this particular sentence, which I adore, is the way that S sound is intermittent. So that snake is moving over the gravel, but the S sound is almost stopping and starting. The soft rustling of the gravel, so it then stops when we get to of the gravel as the body slid over the loose stones. So that intermittent S sound really seems to imitate the way in which the snake is moving. Okay, so this lesson is a writing lesson. We haven't done, on the face of it, too many writing techniques. Just want to recap what we've talked about so far, what I've talked about. This lesson is all about providing you with methods and techniques to help you get your writing better, to help you get your writing to connect to readers. And there are 4 very important parts of connecting to a reader. They are to make the reader see it, to make the reader hear it, to make the reader feel it, and to make the reader turn the page. These are the four main rules as a writer. And I've just talked about 2. So in your writing, I would like you to use the metaphoric, use similes, use metaphors, compare things that don't belong. We've got the snake being as thick as an arm. 2 things that don't belong together are pushed together to make us visualize. So first thing that it would be worth you writing down today would be to make the reader, see it, to make the reader see, using metaphors and similes. The next part, which is a bit more complex, is to try and make the reader hear. So there you might want to use words that really sound, words that perhaps might utilise sibilants or plosive sounds. It doesn't matter that you're not familiar with the names of these linguistic terms like sibilants and plosive yet, but you know what these sounds are. You know what words there are that sound expressive. So use those in your writing. A couple of years ago, I went back to university to study a master's, and we did a lot of creative writing in that master's, and it changed my life actually. And the thing that I spent all those years at university learning, I'm going to try and condense into a very small bite-sized chunk for you, and it's to do with feeling. There's something about great writers that make us feel. In that story of Roald Dahl's, he makes us feel anxious. He makes us feel frightened. And he does so in an amazing way. And I want to talk to you about that. This is the next part of today's lesson, which is making the reader feel. So here we have just a little bit of an extract here from the story I've just read. And this is Roald Dahl making the reader feel. It would reach him in another 4 or 5 seconds. I leant out of the window and held my breath. Salamu swung round and faced the snake. I saw him go into a crouch. He crouched very low with one leg behind the other, like a runner about to start a 100-yard sprint, and he was holding the long rake out in front of him. So just to visualise, I mean, I'm a man that's full of fear, I'll be honest with you, and I'm pretty afraid of snakes and anything, and crocodiles, and I don't go anywhere near crocodiles or snakes. The thought of being 15 paces away from a black mamba that is about to strike is petrifying to me. And if I was retelling this account without any of these writing techniques that I'm going to teach you, I would say how desperately afraid I was, how fear was the thing that was racing around my body. But there's an enormous problem with doing that, and Roald Dahl is avoiding it. We know, well, we sense, this is the really important part of it, we sense that this is a very dangerous situation, and we sense the fear, but Roald Dahl is not telling us to feel it. he's not telling us at all. At the beginning, he says he's frightened of snakes, but in this account, he's not telling us to be afraid. He is creating the conditions for our fear. He is describing the scene. He is describing what Salomo is doing. He's not saying how Salomo is feeling. He's not even saying how he is feeling, because as soon as Roald Dahl does that, he takes away our ability to feel. If you're told to do something, and I know this is certainly my experience, if I'm told to do something, I'm often really resistant to it. I have to work it out for myself. And that's what great writers do. They get the reader to work it out for themselves. So in your writing, if you're trying to make the reader afraid, you must not use fear words. It seems mad, but it's so useful. Don't use words like scared. Don't use words like terror. Don't use words like panic, because as soon as you do, you're going to steal the imagining and the feeling from the reader. And when I spent those years at university recently learning all about that, I've condensed it. If somebody had told me that at the beginning, I probably wouldn't have really understood. You have to feel it for yourself. So here then, have another look. There's no words of panic, of fear. There are no words here that are telling the reader that they must be afraid. It's central that when you are writing creatively, that you don't use abstract nouns, that you don't use words to do with emotions, because as soon as you start doing so, you're stealing stuff from the reader. You're stealing the opportunity for the reader to feel. So when you write your stories, try and remove those emotion words. Remember, it's about creating the conditions. It's about showing the reader the circumstances of the fear, not telling them to be afraid. So a really good rule is to not use abstract nouns. Don't tell the reader. You've got to make them think, see, I don't know why I'm doing that, see, hear and feel. This is central to writing. Okay, next up. Remembering, guys, that these are techniques that you can adopt in your writing. And it's going to take some time, it's going to take some development and practice. But great writers make us see, hear, feel, and turn the page. And these are some really important parts of those techniques. You want to make the writer see with metaphors, hear with the sound of words, feel by avoiding telling the reader what to feel. And the last but not least, which I find amazing, is the way in which writers make us turn the page. So this story, for my money, is full of drama, and it's full of suspense and full of fear. And this, I think, is an amazing piece of writing because it really makes us want to read on and turn the page. Its small triangular snake's head was raised up in the air, and I could hear the soft rustling of the gravel as the body slid over the loose stones. I have the whole nightmarish picture of that scene still before my eyes. The morning sunshine on the garden, the massive baobab tree in the background, Salomo in his old khaki shorts and shirt and bare feet standing brave and absolutely still with the upraised rake in his hands. I wonder if you can guess why that particular bit is amazing. See if you can write that in the chat while I talk about this aspect. So here we've got the beginning of the story that I was reading, started sort of here, and the snake appeared here. I go on to read almost an entire page before Salome strikes with the gravel. What is also amazing is that we're told that the snake can run as fast as a galloping horse and can outrun a man sprinting, and yet it takes a minute or more for the snake that is only 15 paces away to reach Salome. There, Roald Dahl is freezing time. He's stopping things move on, and he is drawing out that suspense. So freezing time is a wonderful technique. And another thing he does, which is just beautiful, is he completely distracts us. So we've got the snake that's now must be about 5 paces away from Salome, and here we have it's about to get to him, and then he says, I have that whole nightmarish picture. He's sort of broken a bit of a rule there with nightmarish, but it doesn't go on to say that we must feel afraid as readers. And then he says this, which is, I think, remarkable, an amazing genius as a writer. The morning sunshine on the garden, the massive baobab tree in the background, Salome in his old khaki shorts and shirt and bare feet, standing brave and absolutely still, with the upraised rake in his hands. So before we get to Salome at the end of that little section, Roald Dahl has asked us to look away. He's asking us to look at the garden, the morning sunshine on the garden, which must be over there. He's asking us to look at the baobab tree in the background. And these things are not the snake. Essential to great writing is to hide the thing that is the gold, the treasure. In this instance, it's that snake attack. And actually what Roald Dahl is doing is he's hiding the event. If I was imagining, or rather if I was remembering that story, I might just only remember Salome with the rake on top of the snake. But as a writer, Roald Dahl knows that his job is to make the reader see it, feel it, hear it, and fundamentally turn the page. So he's leaving that treasure right at the end of the story. And at the moment that we're about to get to it, what he's doing is he is distracting us. He's like saying, look over there. Don't look at the snake that's coming right here. Look over there. Okay. So this is a really central piece of writing. And what I'd like you to try and do in your stories is to try and distract the reader. In fact, what I'd like you to do, this is a really great technique as well, is I'd like you to try and retell the snake story. You can watch this video back, but I'd like you to retell it, but perhaps in your own words. You can use as much of Roald Dahl's as you want, but I want you to try out these techniques. I want you to employ imagery, employ simile and metaphor to try and make the reader see it. So the task is, you're going to tell this story of Salome in the garden about to be attacked by a black mamba. You can change as much of it as you like. You can copy as much of Roald Dahl's as you like, but I want you to start trying to use your own imagery. I want you to make the reader see it. I want you to use imagery. I want you to try and make the reader hear what's going on. That amazing part where the snake is moving over the loose stones. We hear the snake. It's imitating what the snake is doing and how it's moving. I'd like you to try and do that. Like I say, by all means, steal Roald Dahl's words, use as much of his story as you want, but crucially, attempt these things. Make the reader see it with the metaphoric, make the reader hear it with using amazing sounds. And the last two things that we've really been working on are making the reader feel. Don't tell the reader to be afraid. Don't use fear words. After all, words are just words. You have to link them together to be able to create something. And I want you to describe the scene. Create the conditions of fear. Don't tell the reader to be afraid. And the last part of this which is really central, is that when you're telling your stories and you're writing, don't reveal the exciting stuff, all the exciting stuff at the beginning. As a teacher in secondary schools, when I started teaching, often my students would write about zombie apocalypse, and they would write about the zombie apocalypse in the first paragraph and then didn't really know what to write next. The game in writing, and it is a game, is for you to think of the event and do everything you can to hide it. When we read, and reading is a great pleasure, we are racing to get to the end of the page. We're racing to get to the end of the book to find out what happens next. And that's enabled by amazing writers hiding the treasure. So I want you to tell this story, and you can absolutely send this in to me. You can send this into, we'll have a link very shortly in the chat. I'll write it in a second. You can send that in to me. That's lockdownlessons@Skool Cornwall, and I'll take a look at it. But I want you to try these techniques in your writing. See it, hear it, feel it, turn the page. And the last thing I'd like to say is that when I was young and my granddad and my parents would read me stories, for me, that was when things came alive. And I remember when I was at secondary school, I fell out of love with reading, but I would really enjoy stories listening to stories. Now the technology is such that we have amazing audio books, and listening to those stops us getting stuck on words. So if you enjoyed listening to this story, you enjoyed me reading it, try and check out some audio books, because it's the same thing as reading on the page, but it's perhaps easier to think about how these techniques come about. So I definitely recommend listening to stories, and I'll talk about those in sessions to come. But for now, what I'd really like you to do is I'd like you to attempt on your own the story of Simile. You can steal as much as you'd like, or you can copy as much as you'd like. And crucially, I'd like you to use these aspects. I want you to use imagery. I want you to use words that sound and imitate what's going on. I want you to make the reader feel the fear and danger, whether that means obviously that you want to hide that treasure, hide the event, and like Roald Dahl does amazingly, is make the reader look away, and that's it. So using these techniques can improve your writing, and it really can, trust me, and it really works when you start employing these in your stories. We will come back to different writing frames and different techniques that are going to help you write in a developed way, but these 4 elements are the cornerstone of great writing. It's magic what writers can do. They can make you see it, hear it, feel it, and turn the page. And it's worth remembering that you are also a writer too. When you write your story, you are a writer just like they are. So use these methods, it will definitely improve your writing. So please like and subscribe. Please continue coming to these sessions. Please follow us on our Facebook page, Lockdown Lessons Live. Please follow us on our crowdfunder page, Lockdown Lessons Live. And if you have any questions and you want to get in touch about your writing or about what we're doing here, please contact us and please send your stories in. So I hope you're safe and well wherever you are, and I'll see you next week. All the very best and take care. Bye.